The year was 2347, and humanity had been alone for a very long time. For 200 years they had looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. They had sent probes and signals into the darkness, but nothing ever answered back. So they stopped waiting for answers and started building their own future. Captain Daniel Harris stood on the bridge of the largest machine ever created by human hands. The USS Goliath stretched nearly 12 kilometers from bow to stern. It was not just a ship. It was a floating city made of steel and fire, and the dreams of a species that refused to stay small. 15,000 crew members lived and worked inside its massive hull. They maintained its engines and weapons and life support systems. They were the best humanity had to offer, and they all understood that history was about to be made. Daniel was 57 years old, with silver hair and calm gray eyes that had seen many battles. He had commanded smaller vessels during the Mars insurrection 20 years ago. He had lost friends and saved lives and learned that command was not about glory, but about responsibility. Now he stood at the center of the most powerful weapon ever built, and he felt the weight of that responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. Commander Lisa Monroe stood beside him. She was his executive officer and his most trusted advisor. Lisa was 42 with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She had a gift for tactics and strategy that made her invaluable in any crisis. She had served with Daniel for 15 years, and they understood each other without needing many words. The bridge was a massive circular room filled with holographic displays and control stations. Crew members moved with quiet efficiency as they prepared for departure. Lieutenant Kevin Brooks sat at the navigation console. He was young and eager, with blonde hair and bright blue eyes. This was his first deep space assignment, and his excitement was barely contained. Ensign Christopher Grant monitored the sensor arrays with careful attention. He was quiet and methodical, and never missed a single anomaly in the data streams. Dr. Nicole Turner entered the bridge with a tablet in her hands. She was the chief science officer, and her mind worked faster than most computers. She had dark skin and kind brown eyes, and a voice that could explain complex theories in simple words. She approached Daniel with an expression of barely contained excitement. She reported that they had detected unusual energy signatures coming from a region near Alpha Centauri. The patterns did not match anything in their databases. They were organized and repeating, which suggested artificial origin. Something was out there, and it was not natural. Daniel considered this information carefully. For 200 years, humanity had searched for signs of other life. Now, on the very first voyage of their greatest achievement, they might have found exactly what they were looking for. He opened a channel to Earth Command. Admiral Patricia Wright appeared on the main view screen. She was 65 years old, with white hair pulled back in a tight bun and a face that showed decades of service. She commanded all of Earth's space forces, and she had personally approved Daniel for this mission. She listened to the report and made her decision quickly. The Goliath was authorized to investigate. This was exactly what they had built the ship for. Daniel gave the order, and the crew responded instantly. Chief Engineer Samuel Wright reported that the quantum fold engines were fully charged and ready for activation. These engines were humanity's greatest technological achievement. They could bend space itself and allow the ship to cross vast distances in moments. The technology had been developed from fragments of alien probes that had entered the solar system decades ago. Those probes had self-destructed before they could be captured, but humanity had learned enough from the wreckage to revolutionize their understanding of physics. The countdown began, and every crew member braced themselves. The quantum fold was not a gentle process. Reality itself seemed to stretch and twist around the ship. Colors shifted into spectrums that human eyes were not designed to see. Some crew members felt dizzy or nauseous, but the sensation passed quickly. When reality snapped back into place, They were no longer in their home system. Kevin Brooks announced their position. They had traveled over 4 light years in less than 3 seconds. Alpha Centauri burned bright on the view screen, and humanity had officially become an interstellar species. But the celebration was short-lived. Christopher Grant reported multiple contacts on the sensors. Not energy signatures this time, but physical objects. Thousands of them scattered across 3 star systems. The Goliath moved closer to investigate, and what they found made everyone fall silent. It was a debris field. Broken hulls of ships floated in the void. Some were small fighters barely larger than Earth shuttles. Others were massive vessels that might have carried thousands of crew. All of them were destroyed. Weapons burns scarred their surfaces. Holes had been punched through their armor. This was not an accident or a natural disaster. This was the aftermath of a war. Nicole analyzed the debris and discovered something troubling. The ships came from multiple sources. Their designs were completely different from each other. Some used metals that did not exist on Earth. Others had organic components woven into their structures. At least 7 different species had built these vessels, and all of them had been destroyed together. Lisa studied the tactical data and painted a grim picture. The attacking force had been overwhelming. The defenders had fought hard, but they never stood a chance. Energy weapon signatures suggested technology far beyond anything humans had developed. Whoever did this had power that made the Goliath look like a toy. Daniel walked slowly across the bridge and stared at the debris on the view screen. Somewhere out there was a force capable of destroying entire fleets from multiple civilizations. Humanity had wanted to find life among the stars, but perhaps some things were better left undiscovered. Kevin whispered what everyone was already thinking. They were not alone, and something terrible was hunting in the darkness between stars. The universe was not empty. It was a battlefield, and humanity had just stumbled into the middle of a war they did not understand. Daniel took a deep breath and made his decision. They would not run. They would not hide. They had come to learn what was out there, and that was exactly what they were going to do. He ordered the crew to continue deeper into the debris field. Somewhere in this graveyard of ships, there had to be answers. The Goliath moved forward into the unknown, and humanity took another step into a galaxy that was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The Leviathan had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Goliath drifted through the debris field for 6 hours, while the science team collected samples and analyzed wreckage. Nicole and her researchers worked without rest. They found evidence of advanced technology and brutal warfare. Whatever had happened here occurred centuries ago, but the scars remained fresh in the cold vacuum of space. Daniel stood on the bridge reviewing their findings when Christopher Grant suddenly tensed at his station. His voice was calm but urgent as he reported new contacts. Multiple faster-than-light signatures were converging on their position from different directions. Someone had noticed their arrival. Lisa immediately ordered the crew to battle stations. Alarms rang through the corridors of the Goliath, and 15,000 people moved to their assigned positions with practiced efficiency. Weapons Officer Lieutenant Ryan Peters brought the main batteries online. The ship hummed with power as defensive shields activated and targeting systems locked onto the approaching signatures. They emerged from hyperspace in a flash of distorted light. 17 vessels of varying sizes and designs appeared around the Goliath in a loose formation. They were alien in every sense of the word. Some had smooth organic hulls that seemed almost alive. Others bristled with weapons and armor plating. A few were elegant and graceful like works of art floating in the void. Christopher analyzed their signatures and confirmed what everyone already suspected. These ships came from at least 7 different species. They had arrived together, which meant they were allies, or at least working toward a common purpose. A communication signal reached the Goliath and Nicole. activated the translation matrix. This system had been developed over decades in preparation for this exact moment. It analyzed language patterns and converted alien speech into something humans could understand. The process was not perfect, but it was good enough. The main view screen flickered and an alien face appeared. It was tall and thin with iridescent wings folded behind its back. Large compound eyes reflected the light of distant stars and mandibles clicked as it spoke. This was Ambassador Vethkara of the Selvani Dominion, and its voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The message was simple and direct. The humans had entered forbidden space. They had trespassed into a region controlled by the Galactic Concordat. The Concordat was an alliance of 12 spacefaring species that had governed this part of the galaxy for over 40,000 years. The humans were ordered to surrender their vessel immediately and submit to judgment. Daniel listened carefully and remained calm. He had faced hostile negotiations before, and panic never helped anyone. He responded with equal formality and explained that humanity came in peace. They were explorers seeking knowledge and understanding. They had no hostile intentions toward the Concordat or any of its member species. Vethkara seemed unimpressed. It stated that the humans had built a warship of unprecedented size and armed it with weapons capable of destroying planets. Such a vessel could only have one purpose, and peace was not at. Daniel considered this perspective and understood the concern. To outside observers, the Goliath must have looked terrifying. He made a decision that surprised even Lisa. He invited the Concordat delegation to come aboard and see for themselves what humanity was truly about. The alien ships held their positions while the delegation debated among themselves. Finally, Vethkara agreed to the invitation. A shuttle detached from the Selvani vessel and approached the Goliath. It was joined by representatives from 5 other species who wanted to witness this strange new arrival firsthand. The shuttle landed in the Goliath's main hangar bay, and Security Chief Nathan Cole waited with an honor guard. Nathan was a large man with dark skin and a shaved head. He had spent 20 years protecting diplomats and dignitaries, and his presence alone was enough to discourage trouble. He escorted the aliens toward the bridge with respect, but also with caution. The delegation included 6 beings from 6 different worlds. Vethkara led them with its wings occasionally twitching in what might have been nervousness. Behind it walked High Counselor Drenmok of the Torvaisi Republic. Drenmok was reptilian with green scales and wise old eyes that had seen centuries of history. There were others too. A crystalline being that communicated through vibrations. A 4-armed mammal covered in soft gray fur. Each one represented a civilization older than human recorded history. As they walked through the corridors of the Goliath, their disbelief grew with every step. Vethkara asked how large the vessel was, and Lisa answered honestly. 12 kilometers from bow to stern. The alien stopped walking and its compound eyes widened. The largest Concordat dreadnought measured barely 2 kilometers. The humans had built something 6 times larger on their first attempt. Samuel Wright met them in the engineering section and explained their technology. The quantum fold engines that allowed faster than light travel. The fusion reactors that powered the entire ship. The weapon systems capable of destroying armored targets at extreme range. Each revelation drew deeper silence from the alien observers. Drenmok finally spoke with a voice heavy with age and experience. It asked how long humanity had been traveling among the stars. Lisa answered truthfully. This was their very first interstellar voyage. The Goliath had been in service for only 3 months. The delegation stopped moving entirely. Vethkara made a sound that the translator could not interpret. Drenmok closed its ancient eyes and seemed to be struggling with something profound. The other aliens exchanged glances that needed no translation. For 40,000 years, the Concordat had considered itself the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy. They had developed their technology slowly over countless generations. They had fought wars and made peace and built an alliance that spanned dozens of star systems. And now a species they had never encountered had appeared with a single ship that could destroy their entire combined fleet. A species that had achieved in centuries what took them millennia. A species that was only just beginning to explore. Drenmach opened its eyes and looked at Daniel with an expression the captain could not read. It said that the Concordat had made a terrible mistake. They had come to confront a threat, but instead they had found something far more unexpected. They had found hope. Daniel did not understand what the alien meant, but before he could ask, Christopher's voice came over the intercom. His tone was urgent and afraid. Something else was coming. Something that made the Concordat delegation react with pure terror. The galaxy was about to show humanity exactly why hope was such a rare and precious thing. The change in the alien delegation was immediate and terrifying. One moment they were discussing technology and alliances. The next they were trembling with a fear so deep it seemed to come from their very souls. Drenmach grabbed Daniel's arm with surprising strength for such an old being. Its scales had gone pale and its voice cracked as it spoke. The humans needed to run. They needed to activate their engines and flee this place immediately. There was no time for questions or explanations. Death was coming. Daniel had never seen such raw terror in any living creature. He demanded to know what was happening, but the aliens were already moving toward the hangar bay. Vethkar's wings buzzed frantically as it ordered its shuttle to prepare for emergency departure. The crystalline being vibrated at frequencies that shattered nearby glass panels. Lieutenant Amanda Cole's voice came over the bridge speakers. She was the tactical officer, and her words were measured and professional despite what she was seeing on her screens. A massive hyperspace rupture was forming at the edge of the system. The energy readings were off every scale they had. Whatever was coming was big, and it was coming fast. The delegation froze at the hangar entrance. Drenmach turned back to look at Daniel with eyes that had accepted death. It was too late to run. They had been found. Daniel ordered the alien delegation to the observation deck where they would be safe, and then he ran to the bridge. Lisa was already there, coordinating the crew. Christopher tracked the hyperspace rupture as it grew larger and more unstable. Nicole analyzed the energy patterns and found something disturbing. The signature matched residual traces found on the destroyed ships in the debris field. The rupture tore open and they emerged. 300 warships poured into normal space like a swarm of hungry predators. They were unlike anything human eyes had ever witnessed. Their hulls were covered in organic armor that pulsed with sickly bioluminescent light. Weapons ports opened and closed like hungry mouths. They moved with a coordination that suggested a hive mind or perhaps something even more alien. At the center of the formation was a flagship that defied description. It was nearly as large as the Goliath, but its shape was wrong. Twisted spires reached out from its hull like claws grasping at the void. Dark energy crackled across its surface. Looking at it made crew members feel physically ill. It was not just a ship. It was a nightmare given form. The Concordat vessels scattered in panic. They had been prepared to confront humanity, but they were completely unprepared for this. Their communications filled with screaming and prayers. In a dozen languages, Drenmach's voice came over the intercom from the observation deck. It explained everything in broken sentences filled with terror. The Kethvari had found them. The Kethvari who had hunted the galaxy for 100,000 years. The Kethvari who consumed civilizations and harvested entire species for purposes no one understood. The debris fields were their work. The fear was their legacy. The Concordat existed not as conquerors, but as survivors hiding in the margins of space. For millennia, the 12 species of the Concordat had lived in constant fear. They avoided certain regions of space. They kept their technology deliberately primitive to avoid detection. They never built anything that might attract attention. But somehow the HFY had found them anyway, and now they would all die together. Transmission came from the HFY flagship. It was not words exactly, but something that the translation matrix struggled to interpret. Images and emotions forced their way into the minds of everyone who heard it. Submission or extinction. Surrender or death. There was no negotiation. There was no mercy. There was only the hunger that had consumed 1,000,000 worlds. Dremok pleaded with Daniel to save his crew if he could. The humans should flee and leave the Concordat to their fate. Their engines were faster, and their ship was stronger. Perhaps they could escape and warn their homeworld. Perhaps humanity could prepare for the day when the HFY came for Earth. Daniel listened to these words and felt something stir in his chest. It was not fear, although that was certainly present. It was something older and deeper. It was the same feeling his ancestors had when they stood against impossible odds throughout history. It was defiance in its purest form. He looked at Lisa and saw the same fire in her eyes. He looked at Kevin and Christopher and Nicole and every crew member on the bridge. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. They had all sworn an oath to protect humanity and its interests among the stars. Running away would keep them alive, but it would also prove that humanity was just another species waiting to be hunted. Daniel made his decision, and his voice was steady when he gave the order. All hands to battle stations. Charge main weapons. Raise shields to maximum. The Goliath was not going anywhere. Dremok heard this over the intercom and could not believe what it was hearing. It demanded to know if the humans understood what they were facing. 300 HFY warships had destroyed armadas 10 times larger. No one had ever defeated them in open combat. No one had even survived long enough to retreat. Daniel responded with a simple truth. Humanity had spent 200 years preparing for the unknown. They had built the Goliath specifically because they knew the galaxy might be hostile. They had armed it with weapons designed to fight against superior numbers. They had trained its crew to face death without flinching. The HFY had never encountered a species like humanity before. They had never faced a ship like the Goliath. And they had certainly never met Daniel Harris. Ryan Peters reported that all weapons were charged and ready. Nathan Cole confirmed that his Marine battalions were standing by. The ship's AI-designated Aurora calculated firing solutions for all 300 enemy contacts simultaneously. Every system was green. Every crew member was prepared. On the observation deck, the Concordat delegation watched in stunned silence as the human vessel moved forward instead of retreating. The Goliath's running lights shifted from standard white to combat red. Its weapon ports opened with mechanical precision. Vethkara asked what the humans thought they were doing. Lisa answered with a smile that held no warmth. They were going to teach the HFY something new. They were going to teach them what fear felt like. The distance between fleets closed rapidly, and the greatest battle in human history was about to begin. The HFY attacked without warning or hesitation. Dark energy beams lanced across the void from dozens of vessels simultaneously. The Concordat escort ships that had accompanied the delegation tried to flee, but they never had a chance. 3 vessels were destroyed in the opening salvo. Their hulls cracked open, and atmosphere vented into space along with the screaming crews inside. The remaining Concordat ships scattered in all directions. Some managed to enter hyperspace and escape. Others were cut down before they could activate their engines. Within 30 seconds, only the Goliath remained to face the enemy, fleet alone. The dark energy beams found their new target and hammered against the human vessel. Hundreds of impacts struck the shields in rapid succession. The bridge shook slightly and warning lights flickered across several consoles. Christopher reported shield status at 94% and holding steady. The HFY fleet paused. For the first time in recorded history, their weapons had failed to immediately destroy a target. Their hive consciousness processed this information and reached a conclusion. The prey was unusual. More firepower was required. The Nightmare flagship moved forward, and its main weapon charged with visible power. Reality itself seemed to bend around the barrel as energies that should not exist in normal space gathered for release. The weapon that had shattered worlds and broken the spirits of countless civilizations prepared to fire. Daniel gave his first offensive order of the battle. Ryan Peters acknowledged and pressed the firing command. The Goliath's main cannon was called the Solar Lance by its designers. It focused antimatter annihilation through a magnetic containment field and released the resulting energy in a concentrated beam. The theoretical output was enough to crack a small moon. No one had ever tested it against a real target until this moment. A beam of pure white light erupted from the bow of the Goliath. It crossed the distance between ships in less than a heartbeat. It struck the HFY flagship directly in the center of its twisted hull, the nightmare vessel that had terrorized the galaxy for 100,000 years split in two. Its organic armor provided no protection against the impossible heat. Its dark energy shields collapsed instantly. Secondary explosions rippled through both halves as power systems overloaded and ammunition cooked off. In less than 5 seconds, the flagship was nothing but expanding debris and fading fire. Silence fell across the battlefield. The HFY hive mind struggled to process what had happened. Their flagship was invincible. Their flagship had destroyed 1 million enemies. Their flagship was now scattered atoms drifting in the void. Daniel did not give them time to recover. He ordered all batteries to open fire. The Goliath had been designed to fight outnumbered. It carried weapon systems that would have seemed excessive for an entire fleet. Missile batteries launched swarms of self-guided warheads. Secondary beam weapons targeted multiple ships simultaneously. Point defense cannons filled space with streams of hypervelocity projectiles. Ensign Amy Lawson controlled the missile systems with calm precision. She designated targets and release sequences while the ship's computer calculated optimal trajectories. Each warhead carried a fusion payload capable of destroying a cruiser-sized vessel. She launched them by the hundreds. Petty Officer Marcus Dean managed the point defense grid. His systems were designed to intercept incoming fire, but they worked equally well against small enemy ships. Fighters and bombers that tried to approach the Goliath were shredded before they could get within weapons range. The HFY finally organized a counterattack. 60 vessels coordinated their fire and concentrated everything they had on a single point, the human shields. The impacts were staggering. The Goliath shook violently, and crew members grabbed onto whatever they could find. Christopher reported shields at 71%. Lisa calculated a tactical response, and Daniel approved it instantly. The Goliath rotated on its axis to present fresh shield emitters to the enemy fire. At the same time, the Solar Lance recharged and fired again. Another HFY vessel ceased to exist. The battle became a dance of destruction. The Goliath moved through the enemy formation with surprising grace for such a massive vessel. Kevin Brooks handled the navigation controls with skill that impressed even the veteran officers around him. He anticipated enemy movements and positioned the ship to maximize its firing arcs while minimizing exposure. Ryan Peters fired the main cannon 11 more times during the engagement. Each shot destroyed at least one enemy vessel. Some shots passed through multiple ships before finally dissipating. The HFY had never developed shields capable of stopping such power, because they had never imagined such power could exist. Nicole monitored the enemy communications and reported something remarkable. The HFY were experiencing an emotion they had not felt in millennia. They were afraid. Their hive mind was fragmenting as individual ships broke formation and tried to flee. Daniel ordered pursuit. No enemy would escape to warn others or rebuild their forces. The Goliath's engines flared, and the massive ship accelerated to chase down the fleeing vessels. One particularly fast, HFY cruiser almost reached the hyperspace threshold. Lisa calculated a micro-jump that would intercept it. The quantum fold engines activated for just a fraction of a second. The Goliath vanished from one location and reappeared directly in the cruiser's path. Ryan fired before the enemy could react. The battle lasted 11 minutes from first shock to last explosion. 300 HFY warships had entered the system with absolute confidence in their invincibility. 0 HFY warships remained when the firing stopped. Samuel Wright reported damage to 3 external sensor arrays and minor scoring on the forward hull plating. Total casualties among the human crew numbered 0. On the observation deck, the Concordat delegation stood in absolute stillness. Drenmach had tears streaming down its scaled face. The ancient counselor had lived for 300 years in constant fear of the HFY. Its grandparents had lived in fear. Its entire species had organized their civilization around avoiding these monsters. And now a single ship from a species they had just met had destroyed them in the time it took to eat a meal. Vethkara approached Daniel as he entered the observation deck. The ambassador's compound eyes reflected the debris field that had once been an invincible armada. Its voice was barely a whisper as it asked a simple question. "What are you?" Daniel looked out at the stars and considered his answer carefully. They were humans. They were explorers. They were protectors of those who could not protect themselves, and they were just getting started. The news spread across the Concordat faster than any ship could travel. Hyperspace communication relays carried the impossible message to every member world within days. The HFY had been defeated. 300 of their warships had been destroyed by a single vessel. The nightmare that had haunted a dozen civilizations for millennia was finally over. At first, no one believed it. The Torvesi thought it was a cruel joke, or perhaps enemy propaganda designed to lure them out of hiding. The Salvani demanded visual confirmation before they would accept such an outrageous claim. Even species that had witnessed the battle through their escaping ships struggled to process what they had seen, but the evidence was undeniable. Long-range sensors detected the debris field. Communication intercepts revealed the silence of the HFY hive mind in that region of space. Scouts sent to investigate found nothing but wreckage and the ion trail of a single massive vessel heading toward an unknown destination. The Goliath was coming. Daniel stood on the bridge as Earth appeared on the view screen. The blue and green marble that had birthed humanity looked impossibly beautiful after everything they had witnessed. He thought about the crew members who had trusted him during the battle. He thought about the aliens who had watched with disbelief as their ancient enemy was destroyed. He thought about what this all meant for the future. Admiral Patricia Wright greeted them in orbit with a fleet of escort vessels. Her face on the view screen showed a mixture of pride and relief that words could not fully express. She had sent them into the unknown, and they had returned victorious. The mission reports would take months to fully analyze, but the basic facts were already clear. Humanity had made first contact with alien life. They had discovered a galactic community living in terror of an ancient threat. They had eliminated that threat in a single engagement. And they had done it all on their very first voyage beyond the solar system. The crew was granted extended leave, while the Goliath underwent inspection and minor repairs. Daniel attended countless meetings and briefings with military leaders and politicians. He told his story again and again to people who could barely believe what they were hearing. Nicole, Turner presented her findings to the United Earth Science Council. The Concordat species represented tens of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and technology. Some of their developments were beyond current human understanding. Others were surprisingly primitive compared to what humans had achieved independently. A collaborative research initiative could benefit everyone involved. Lisa Monroe was promoted to captain and given command of the USS Valiant, the second Titan-class vessel nearing completion in the orbital shipyards. She accepted the honor with characteristic composure, but Daniel saw the pride in her eyes. She had earned this through years of dedication and a battle that would be remembered forever. The Concordat sent formal diplomatic envoys to Earth within weeks. Drenmach led the delegation personally, despite its advanced age. The ancient counselor had decided that witnessing the birth of a new era was worth any physical discomfort the journey might cause. It stood before the United Earth Assembly and spoke words that would echo through history. The Concordat had existed for 40,000 years by hiding and surviving. They had preserved their civilizations by never challenging the Kethfori directly. They had accepted their place as prey because they believed there was no other option. But humanity had shown them a different path. Humanity had proven that the monsters could be defeated. The 12 species of the Concordat formally requested an alliance with Earth. They offered their knowledge and their resources in exchange for protection. They asked humanity to lead them into a future where they no longer had to fear the darkness between stars. The Assembly debated for less than an hour before reaching a unanimous decision. Humanity would accept this responsibility. They would build more ships and train more crews. They would stand between the innocent and those who would prey upon them. This was not conquest but guardianship. Admiral Wright announced the construction of 12 additional Titan-class warships. Each would be commanded by officers trained on the Goliath and crewed by the finest personnel humanity could produce. They would patrol the space lanes and respond to threats wherever they emerged. The galaxy would never again belong to the hunters. Kevin Brooks requested assignment to the Exploration Division. He wanted to chart new systems and discover new civilizations. Daniel approved his transfer personally and wished him well. The young officer had proven himself during the battle and would continue to prove himself in the years ahead. Christopher Grant took over as chief sensor officer aboard the Goliath. His careful attention to detail had helped them survive their first encounter and would help them survive many more. He never sought glory or recognition, but his contributions were invaluable. Samuel Wright began collaborating with Concordat engineers to improve the quantum fold engines. The next generation would be faster and more efficient. Perhaps one day humans would be able to cross the entire galaxy in moments. The possibilities seemed endless. On a quiet evening 3 months after the battle, Daniel stood alone on the observation deck of the Goliath. The ship was docked at the orbital station, but its lights still glowed with the promise of future voyages. He looked out at the stars and thought about everything that had changed. Kevin found him there and asked what was on his mind. The young officer had come to say goodbye. Before transferring to his new assignment, Daniel smiled and considered the question carefully. For 200 years, humanity had wondered if they were alone in the universe. They had feared what they might find in the darkness. They had built the Goliath as a shield against unknown terrors. But they had discovered something unexpected. The galaxy was not waiting to destroy them. The galaxy was waiting to be saved. Countless species had lived in terror for countless generations. They had given up hope of anything better. They had accepted suffering as the natural order of things. And then humanity had arrived with a single ship and changed everything. Kevin asked what came next. Daniel looked at his ship and thought about the crew that called it home. He thought about Lisa commanding her own vessel. He thought about the alliance that was forming between worlds. He thought about the children who would grow up in a galaxy without fear. The Goliath's engines hummed as technicians prepared it for the next voyage. There were more Kethvari out there somewhere. There were other threats that the Concordat had not mentioned. There were mysteries and dangers and wonders waiting to be discovered, but humanity was ready. They had always been ready. The first chapter of their galactic story had been written in fire and courage. Many more chapters would follow. Some would be difficult. Some would involve sacrifice and loss. But none would involve surrender or retreat. Kevin saluted and departed to begin his new life among the stars. Daniel watched him go and felt something he had not expected. Hope that the universe was vast and ancient and full of darkness. But humanity had brought light to the galaxy, and they were just getting started.